Ever go on a pilgrimage? Today we're going to be talking about a pilgrimage that's designed especially for young adults. Stay tuned. Today my guest is Will Peterson, a middle school religion teacher from San Diego who has been planning pilgrimages for people 18 to 22, some in that age group. Will, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jack. It's an honor.
I know in our little pre-program talk you come up with some things that we have in common. Tell me about your personal pilgrimage to Rome.
Sure. So when I was an undergrad at the University of Notre Dame, I went and experienced a pilgrimage for the Triduum for Pope Francis's first Easter that Notre Dame had put on the pilgrimage. And it was a life-changing experience and really led me in this direction to make pilgrimage more accessible to young people.
What were you doing directly before you thought this idea of putting pilgrimages together?
Well, I was still a student in college, and I was studying, and I was engaging in my faith and kind of diving a bit more deeply into it and looking at where my talents might be best used in the American Catholic Church.
So your idea was you don't have to go to Rome or Medjugorje or the Holy Land to go on a pilgrimage.
Exactly. You shouldn't have to fly, to do the Camino in Spain. You shouldn't have to go to the Holy Land. There are holy sites here in the United States that should be made accessible, and pilgrimage is such a rich tradition within the Catholic Church. It makes sense to allow people to take advantage of it.
Now, you told me that you went to Kentucky. When I think of Kentucky, I don't think of many places as a pilgrimage there.
Right, and so it's actually, called the Holy Land of Kentucky, where you had the Abbey of Gethsemane, which the Trappists founded, and a couple other female religious orders were founded. And so there is a Catholic section that kind of hides away, but we consider the Abbey of Gethsemane to be a great holy site because Thomas Merton was a monk there, and a great spiritual writer, and someone we consider to be sort of a patron saint of our pilgrims. So our first pilgrimage was 4 days, 75 miles, walked from Lexington, Kentucky, down to the Abbey of Gethsemane. We got to meet the monks, spend time with the monk who had Thomas Merton as his novice master, got to visit Thomas Merton's hermitage, spend time in prayer, and really that was the movement toward we need to get other people to do this. And this is an important aspect and kind of launched Modern Catholic Pilgrim.
How many people went with you on that first pilgrimage?
So the first one, it was my co-founder of the movement, David Cable, and I were the two that were on it. And since then, we've been able to lead a few more pilgrimages. Most recently, we had 10 young adults from the ages of 22 to 26 walk from Mission San Diego to Mission San Luis Rey, 3 days, 48 miles, and stay both nights with host families from parishes along the way.
Father Serra would have loved to have had that.
Exactly, right. It was a little tougher for him when he was moving through California.
The interior part of putting the pilgrimage together, what kind of things were you going through your mind? Or what kind of planning did you have? What inspired you most?
Well, I think that it's such a crucial aspect of spirituality to have that total trust in God. And pilgrimage allows you to really step outside of your comfort zone, your daily life, and to kind of have that challenge to self while knowing that your needs are going to be provided for. You know where you're going to sleep, you know where you're going to eat. You just need to walk to this holy site. That's all you need to do, and you just need to be in contact with God throughout. And so I find that to be a blessing as an interior aspect of the pilgrimage.
Now, what's your personal experience with having gone to a regular pilgrimage? You went to Rome for the Triduum with Pope Francis, and you went to Kentucky. What's the difference between the two?
I think the first one, it was difficult. There's that balance of spiritual tourism as opposed to pilgrimage, and I'm not sure I was quite in the pilgrimage mindset. And there's always a variety of reasons why someone goes on pilgrimage, but the second one to the Abbey, we had spent so much time preparing. I'd had great conversations with people who were going to accept us into their homes, and then to have that experience of the hospitality on the road, and then to get to your holy site after walking and every step for 75 miles. It really opens your eyes to the wonder that is God.
When did the light go on that says, I have to do this?
You know, my idea of kind of conversion in this way is it can be incremental. So I think of various points. I went on this pilgrimage to Rome when I was in college. My senior year, I actually took a train to North Dakota and got out in a small town there and knocked on the rectory door and said, do you mind if I stay here for a couple days? And the priest just said, sure. And that was kind of a sense of whether or not there was this Catholic hospitality in America. And those events then led me to think that there should be kind of a mode in which we bring together the Catholic tradition of hospitality, the Catholic tradition of pilgrimage here in the United States.
Are there other pilgrimage people like you?
So there's a woman who goes by the term the Winter Pilgrim, and she has actually founded an office for pilgrimage out of the Archdiocese of Denver, and it's a canonically recognized office, and she helps lead pilgrimages, and she is almost constantly on pilgrimage throughout the world as an impressive individual in her own right.
Now, how far afield are you planning ahead to go? I mean, you've been to Kentucky.
Sure.
And what are you looking forward to as far as far away?
Right. So, I mean, our ultimate goal would be that someone could step outside their home anywhere in the United States and travel to a holy site in the United States and stay with hosts along the way. If you want to talk about dreaming big, that's our big dream. More concretely, I believe that the missions here in California are a great source of spirituality, and they're set up well that we could develop something akin to the Camino in Spain, in which people could travel to each mission and stay with hosts from Catholic parishes along the way. And so we're working to continue to develop that. We have developed the route from Mission San Diego to Mission San Luis Rey, and I'm in contact with people here in Los Angeles for the missions here, up into the Bay Area, to try and develop a mission trail that's kind of Catholic and a pilgrimage trail.
This must be self-limiting, I would imagine. You're going to have 4, 5, 10 people going, but if 50 want to go, how are you going to find 50 places for them to stay and to support them on the way up? That would be difficult. So you're looking at smaller groups on order.
Right. We kind of have a two-prong focus. The first would be really modern Catholic pilgrim organized pilgrimages that might be a little larger, like the 10 that we took most recently. They would maybe occur more quarterly, not too frequently, in which we might be able to get larger groups. But the other more typical route would be people who are interested in going out on pilgrimage. They would seek out our resources, and we would provide them with that, and it'd be 2 to 3 to 4 people and staying with host families. We did that last summer. We had 3 young men from Louisville, Kentucky work with us. We got them in contact with hosts, and they made the pilgrimage from Louisville, 3 days, 50 miles down to the Abbey of Gethsemane. And so we're looking at those two focuses. But you're right, it wouldn't be one where you'd have these massive groups unless you had a lot of planning go into it.
Weather must play a big part in this. As you go to Seattle, you better bring a raincoat.
Right.
And if you're going to go to Arizona in the summertime, you better bring an umbrella. Mm-hmm. So how do you plan that? There's got to be some logistical work to be done.
Right, and so you take that into consideration. Our first pilgrimage in Kentucky, we did it in late March, and so the weather was pretty decent. Obviously here in California, we're blessed. Really, almost any point in the year, especially in Southern California, you can make pilgrimage, but it's a concern and something to consider.
Does the fact that you're teaching middle school religion play a part in all of this? What do you tell your students? Oh, I'm going to Kentucky. What do they feel about it?
Right, so for them, for the most part, it's just letting them know that I'm praying for them on pilgrimage and that I'm kind of listing off their names and maybe, in the difficult sections of pilgrimage and the hard hike up the hill, kind of just keeping the names and knowing, for whom I walk and my intentions. And so the students have driven me in that way.
I would imagine also that the pilgrimage would be self-limiting for people with special needs, handicaps, people who are disabled. But look into that, how to help people like that enjoy this kind of pilgrimage?
Sure, a great question. What I would say is our focus for the most part is on walked pilgrimage. However, I am of the belief that pilgrimage is really a mindset, and so you could drive a pilgrimage, you could bike a pilgrimage. As long as you're in that mindset, I think the walking, just the rhythm of it, helps you dive into that mindset. But if someone were to travel in a handicapped accessible van on pilgrimage, I think we could work with them, give them resources, provide places for them to stay as well. It doesn't have to be walked, I should say.
Yeah, but certainly the health benefits,
Right.
the mind-clearing benefits.
Of course.
I could just picture a gym pilgrimage. You go to different gyms, and instead of saying 10 Hail Marys, you do 10 reps of this and that. It's an interesting thing to think about. Of course, you'd have to have the time to do it.
Right.
How long does a typical pilgrimage go for you now?
So right now we're cognizant of that, stress of time, and so we're looking at kind of long weekends, a Friday to a Sunday. We started Friday afternoon for the pilgrimage between the missions in San Diego, and that way people don't really have to take off a lot of work. And again, because not all of us can take 2 months to go over to Spain and do the Camino. Some of us, it just needs to be 2 days, 3 days, and so in that way, it's not going to be something that's time prohibitive.
Looking forward to other sites to go to on a pilgrimage, do you have any idea about doing some that are seasonal, like Christmas or Easter?
I would like for them always to be in some way connected to, for example, when we went to Mission San Luis Rey, it was for St. Louis's feast day. And so to have that connection for why you're going on this pilgrimage, so a saint's feast day, for the shrine you're attending, things like that. But it would be great to have Lenten pilgrimages, preparations for Easter, preparations for Christmas, certainly.
That's pretty cool. I would say to our audience, maybe you better get a new pair of walking shoes, a nice knapsack, and pack up a few toiletries and get yourself training to do this kind of thing. Imagine you have to do that.
Right.
Ahead of time, you have to set stuff up.
Right.
Okay, we're going to be back just a little bit with Will Peterson talking about pilgrimages, especially for young adults.
There are times we are joyful and happy. There are also times when we are sad and depressed. Sometimes we laugh. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we become angry. Sometimes we are calm and reflective. Yes, we are emotional people. Often we express our emotions loud and clear, but sometimes we suppress and keep them to ourselves. Our wounded emotions need to be healed to enable us to live normally. We want to offer you a book written by Father Martin Padovani, SVD. It is called Healing Wounded Emotions. Father Martin is a marriage counselor, and this book is the result of his many years of experience. Some of the topics he deals with in this book are anger with other people, anger with ourselves, and even anger with God. But what about forgiveness? Forgiveness of someone that has hurt us, and even forgiveness of ourselves. Then there is the emotion of depression. We know that today there are many who are living with the shadow of depression, and they do not know how to get out of it. Father Martin gives practical solutions to deal with our wounded emotions. So get your copy today. Surely you will be doing yourself a favor. Or maybe you know someone who needs a copy.
Call the number on the screen or email us. You can also get it through our website. Know your emotions and live them to the full. This book will surely give you the peace that you are looking for.
We're back with our guest, Will Peterson, a religion teacher from San Diego, Notre Dame graduate, and modern-day pilgrim. Well, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned the pilgrimage to the Camino in Spain. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So the Camino is a famous pilgrimage in Spain to Santiago, which is considered to be the burial place of St. James, the Apostle. And so it's developed over the last about 1,200 years as a major pilgrimage route that people walk starting in France, other parts of Spain, even from Portugal, to Santiago, and they typically stay in pilgrims' hostels along the way, and it's an extensive pilgrimage that a number of people have undertaken, and probably the most walked pilgrimage.
Anything that you learned there about miracles?
So all I can really speak to is that every time I've gone on pilgrimage, I've had instances where it was clear that God was speaking. And so I think about that first pilgrimage to the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky, and we were praying the Psalms, my friend David and I, as we were walking, and we were kind of just taking one at a time, and we had started kind of halfway through in the Psalm book, and we finished with Psalm 121 ourselves, and then we heard the pealing of the bells at the Abbey calling to midday prayer, and that was our first kind of recognition that we had arrived. And when we walked in, the monks were already chanting Psalm 122, the very next psalm after we had finished. And Psalm 122 is a pilgrim's call for Jerusalem.
That's amazing.
And it was just unbelievable that that could be the connection. And so to recognize God was clearly with us. So I can't call it a miracle, but every time that I've been on pilgrimage, there's some clear way in which God is speaking, which is a beautiful thing.
When I was at Catholic University, during that period, John Kennedy died.
Mm-hmm.
And on that day, I happened to be working in the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception.
Mm-hmm.
And the rector came to me and he said, "We're going to have a Mass at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
I want you to come up to the bell tower with me. It's not finished, and things are on manual switches.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to start at 4 o'clock, and for 1 hour, you'll have to reset it every 10 minutes, so you have to be up there for an hour, and I'll show you how to do it." So we went up, and I turned the switch. The bell started to peal, and at that very instant, clouds drifted away. Sunlight came through a window, one of these shaped windows,
Sure.
and sent a beam of light directly to the tabernacle.
Incredible.
That happens once in a year at that exact same time. So I'm convinced that stuff like that happens for a reason.
Right.
So personally, it was quite an amazing thing. Now, tell us a little bit more about the work of St. James that gives him this exalted position.
Well, you know, an apostle, so he's recognized as having gone out to spread the gospel all the way to Spain, and so in that way seen as a champion for the universal church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I recognize that's what gives him a vaulted importance and makes his burial place to be a tremendous shrine and draw for people.
And that's a how many mile walk?
So it depends on where you start
Yeah.
your Camino, and some people will tell you that you need to start in Paris, and so it's, goodness, maybe 1,000 miles, but it all depends. We obviously haven't put together anything quite to that degree here. I will say it was important to me that our first pilgrimage was at least 100 kilometers, because that's the length you need to be an official pilgrim to receive the Compostela, the stamp of a pilgrim, for the Camino to St. James there in Spain. So we made sure ours was of a distance that would count.
Oh, that's very good, very good.
Yeah, that worked.
So you have to qualify.
Exactly right, as a pilgrim. I don't normally think that's the case, but for the first one, I thought it was important.
When you were at Gethsemane and you're in the space of Thomas Merton,
Sure.
what were you thinking about at that time? Did his work reflect on how you were feeling, what you were doing?
Yes, definitely. I think Thomas Merton is so important, especially to young people today, in that he was a man, a bright, energetic man who really spent a lot of his youth seeking out all of the vices, and he found them ultimately to be lacking. And our young people today, I think unfortunately we get lost in a lot of this, and he found them to be lacking. He turned and gave himself to Christ and became a monk, but he still had his, troubles along the way and owned up to them, and I think that's important for us to see. And of course, when Pope Francis came to America and his address to the Congress, Thomas Merton was one of the 4 Americans that he referenced. And so finding him to be an important figure, I consider him our patron saint of pilgrims. Some may say, how could a monk be a patron saint of pilgrimage? But he wrote a tremendous essay about pilgrimage in which he wrote man instinctively regards himself as a wanderer and a wayfarer, and it is second nature for him to go on pilgrimage in search of a privileged and holy place, a center and source of indefectible life. And so we're naturally drawn to do things like this. He also wrote in the same essay, he writes, there's an inner pilgrimage that we're all on, and there's also the geographic pilgrimage. He said you can have one without the other, but it's best to have both. And so I recognize, yes, we're all pilgrims, we're on this journey throughout life, but there is a key aspect of geographic pilgrimage in which, again, you step outside your comfort zone and you have to have that reliance on God, spend that time in prayer. And then it's been phenomenal to see what our pilgrims gain from being on the road, from interacting with each other, and then the hospitality. And so again, I believe that hospitality in our day and age has gotten a little warped as an idea. And it's the chocolate on your pillow in the hotel. It's a comfy dinner with your dear friends. It's a nice wine list at a restaurant. But hospitality in a biblical sense is that openness to the other, to remove any hostility and to treat the person as a guest. And so we have our hosts. They've never met the pilgrims before, but we contact them beforehand from the parish, and they sign on, and then you get to have these experiences, these great dialogues that are typically, between generations of Catholics, and so you have a dialogue across generations, geographically, different places, and so to have that shared faith, but then to come at it from different angles. And Henry Nouwen, the Dutch priest and great spiritual writer of the 20th century, he writes, "It may be that in receiving hospitality, we learn how to give it." And so I'm hoping that we could have a lot of young people come through and receive just beautiful expressions of hospitality and then go forth and give it themselves. And I think of, on our most recent pilgrimage, I know some of the young women stayed with a woman and they ate ice cream at the end of the day and watched some nature documentaries and had a wonderful time.
I'm going to go on the pilgrimage just for the ice cream.
Exactly.
Now, some of the other writers, and you told me you did a lot of reading.
Sure.
Ian Merton and
Henry Nouwen.
And our controversial nun writer. Sister, what other people do you recommend that we read before we go on our...
That's a good question. We kind of narrowed it down. The Merton essay, it's From Pilgrimage to Crusade, is actually the name of the essay. I also would suggest there's a great speech that a woman, Layla Karst, who is a professor actually at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, who studies pilgrimage. She gave a great speech, the American Friends of the Camino, on suffering and its role in pilgrimage. And I think that one is crucial because suffering is very much an aspect of pilgrimage, especially walked, the blisters and just kind of the hard days, long days. But it should not be what gets glorified. It shouldn't be the emphasis of the pilgrimage. Oh, look, I'm suffering, I'm so good. But rather just accept it as part of your pilgrimage and allow it to serve a part, but not let it to kind of overpower you. And so those would be our starting points most typically. And then I do want our hosts and our pilgrims to read Henry Nouwen on hospitality, because I think it's so important to recognize what you're gaining in that part of it. And I can share the story. It was unbelievable. On the most recent pilgrimage, I stayed with a man who's in his 60s, and he shared that at the age of 18, he left England, left his parents, left everything, and moved to Canada because his family did not want him to become Catholic. He gave up everything he knew for his faith. And that was shocking to me. I consider myself to be a faith-filled person. I couldn't even imagine having that strength. Yeah. And it's not a story that he's normally going to get to share. And he also informed us that he doesn't typically have people into his home, guests. It's typically just kind of his family, but felt that willingness to open up and to have that hospitality and then to share such a story, such an inspirational story. So I hope more people can have this experience. I think it's important. And so I see our project working within pilgrimage and hospitality to kind of bring people together to share their experiences of faith and to really kind of buoy each other in that journey that we're all on.
What would you think might be the parallel of the person that wants to go see Mount Rushmore? I know personally, I went to see it. I wanted to see it. We happened to be close. Let's go.
Sure.
I don't know what, just because it's in picture books and stuff and it's such a big deal.
Right.
Is there some kind of a parallel between what we think in the laic world as opposed to the religious world there must be some kind of driving force, something that's important on
Right.
both sides of the spectrum.
Right. Well, I think that goes back to what Merton had to say about we're all in search of that center of indefectible life, that perfect life. And I think we see a lot of that. We have that kind of innate draw toward nature. Our definition of pilgrimage comes from the German theologian Iso Baumer, who writes that pilgrimage is most typically done by an individual or more frequently a group who travel to a specific place to bring to God and the saints at that place their intentions and their prayers, and then they return home, and we would say changed. And so in my mind, as you know, a holy site, there's that intention that you're going to come to God at that place. And so I think within the Catholic realm, it's more easily found, you know, in churches and shrines, in holy sites. But as long as you have that mindset and you travel and you're willing to bring your intentions. So we make clear to our pilgrims that you need to have intentions. You need to have a reason, a purpose. It's this purpose. It's not tourism. It's not a hike. You purposely are bringing your intention to God, knowing that He's going to hear them. And then you're going to come back to your life, you know, kind of your normal life changed. Yes.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
I want to thank you and your fellow pilgrims, our supporters, those who support the ministry here. And you don't have to travel thousands of miles and spend thousands of dollars to have your own personal pilgrimage. We can be pilgrims just by going down the street, around the corner, across town. God will show you the way. Thanks for watching us, and remember to let God make you smile. Will, thanks again.
Thank you very much, Jack. Appreciate it.
Was great.
There are times we are joyful and happy. There are also times when we are sad and depressed. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry. Sometimes we become angry. Sometimes we are calm and reflective. Yes, we are emotional people. Often we express our emotions loud and clear, but sometimes we suppress and keep them to ourselves. Our wounded emotions need to be healed to enable us to live normally. We want to offer you a book written by Father Martin Padovani, SVD. It is called Healing Wounded Emotions. Father Martin is a marriage counselor, and this book is the result of his many years of experience. Some of the topics he deals with in this book are anger, anger with other people, anger with ourselves, and even anger with God. But what about forgiveness? Forgiveness of someone that has hurt us, and even forgiveness of ourselves. Then there is the emotion of depression. We know that today there are many who are living with the shadow of depression, and they do not know how to get out of it. Father Martin gives practical solutions to deal with our wounded emotions. So get your copy today. Surely you will be doing yourself a favor. Or maybe you know someone who needs a copy.
Call the number on the screen or email us. You can also get it through our website. Know your emotions and live them to the full. This book will surely give you the peace that you are looking for.